Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have a quant video for you guys today, QNT on the exchange. Again, one of our favorite projects to discuss, and for sure one that I accumulate as and when I can, despite the higher price point compared to many other assets out there. Of course, the QNT token is a valuable part of the quant network in general. Of course, the utility aspect, the integral part of the over-ledger network aspect of quant, and of course the access is needed to the over-ledger network with the quant token. Of course, processes or utilizes it for transaction fees and licensing fees as well, and all the other things that can be used for the quant token mechanism is certainly one of the reasons why I'm interested in this project, but also the fact that it works very heavily with the corporate enterprise level of finance, and particularly R3 Corda, of course. You have maybe heard of those before. Certainly go and check out the previous videos I've done on those guys. But yes, of course, with the likes of R3 and Quant working together, it is for sure something that can take us to a next level in terms of talking about things like trade finance, the insurance aspects, the healthcare aspects, trade finance in general. We've done many videos on, and particularly when I was at the TFDI event last year with Andre Kosman, an absolutely fantastic person to have met in person as well as talking to him regularly via LinkedIn, as we talk back and forth on some of the aspirations of the crypto or blockchain markets out there. But for sure, the development between R3 and Quant is quite significant. And it brings me to a direct point here. Before we go into a bit more detail, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. If you haven't done so already, welcome to the channel. And please do hit that like button if you enjoy the content. Let's talk about this in more detail here. So this is actually from a couple of months ago. But I haven't done a video on Quant since I think February, which is a bit disappointing. But anyone knows the situation. All is going well for those that are interested. Can be better in the sense of progression of health and things like that. Not just for me, the other half as well, with all the things that she's been going through. So it's great news, and hopefully gives me a bit more time and flexibility now to focus back in on the channel. Now, the likes here, this is really interesting. Regulated Liability Network, okay? As an organization, I don't know when it was actually created, but if you can imagine, like the Hedera Council, it's a bit like that, but on a level of like actual direct finance companies and organizations. So for example here, industry contributors to the Regulated Liability Network. So just a quick intro before we go into the partnerships and aspects. The Regulated Liability Network, RLN, is a contribution to the global debate of the future of money offered by a group of industry participants, exploring the technical, legal, and business characteristics necessary to provide on-chain 24/7 programmable, they said it wouldn't be programmable, 24/7 programmable final settlement in sovereign currencies, consisting of the liabilities of both public and private regulated financial institutions. Scrolling down, that's obviously the white paper that was created in 2022. It's probably a bit out of date now, and 2 years is a long time in this space. But here's some of the industry competitors like Swift, of course, on there, Lloyds Bank, HSBC, etc. And of course, it's great to see, to my main point really, is the likes of the companies that we invest in, or the tokens that we try and accumulate, in this instance Quant or the QNT token, are having associations with these kind of projects, initiatives, groups, if you like, moving forward. And as we talk about the development of CBDCs, we already punched in information just a minute ago about the development in the environmental aspects, the transition of AI, everything really. And it becomes really interesting, and I quite like this word here, experimentation phase. There's a lot of piloting going on at the moment around the world and trials within the financial industry, particularly relating to digital ledger technology or DLTs. And for sure, to see this kind of interaction with an alliance like this, or a liability network, if you want to call it that, along with some of the major traditional financial banking institutions that are out there in the world, coupled with, of course, the initiatives around the Bank for International Settlements BIS. We talked about this so many times. I can't remember which was the first one we talked about. We had Helvetia, I think it was probably one of the first ones, and Jura. Then there was Rosalind, there was Icebreaker. There's so many. Of course, we covered, I don't know if it was the February one with Quant or the one before that. We covered the Rosalind findings, which were the utilization of Quant providing information and reporting to the BIS on this project of cross-border payments, or the settlements of payments using DLT. So there's a lot of things going on in the background for sure. And here's the interesting part from R3. We know R3 works quite closely with the node systems of XDC network as well, which is another project we talk about quite a lot on the channel. R3 will lend the network its tokenization platform Corda, as well as digital currency solution as a means of providing the critical shared ledger capability. UK Finance says that it intends to publish the results of the network's experimentation phase after the upcoming summer. So it's really exciting. So as I said, I would love to have talked about this when it kind of came out as news. Maybe some of you already heard about that, but yeah, the grand scheme of things, the end of summer is not too far away. It's a bit disappointing. In the UK here, it's always either raining or boring, so it hasn't really felt like summer other than like 1 week. But yeah, summer in terms of the monthly schedule that we have every year, it is relatively soon. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because, and I'm not trying to repeat myself, but on numerous occasions for at least the last 12 months, I've been talking about this period of time for a long time. 2024 into 2025, particularly around this August to November scenario. Now, we've had the UK elections. No doubt in my mind that either next month or certainly in the next couple of months, we will see the interest rates reduction occur. I don't think it will be a huge number straight away. I think it will go up in that quarter point fashion, and this will start stimulating some excitement. I do think that a lot of the movements in the crypto market will happen post US election time, and it's going to be quite interesting because here in the UK, of course, we had Sunak progressing the projects of blockchain, the innovation hub, etc., DLT technology, and CBDC program as well. He was a young leader graduate of the World Economic Forum. And looping that back around to this point, particularly around the US elections, of course, it's kind of renowned that Trump is relatively against the World Economic Forum. Quotes of his, I think, were something around the lines of, they're after you, not me, I'm just standing in their way. Read of that what you will. So it's going to be really interesting if he comes in. Will he progress the crypto blockchain side of it as we think he might do? I mean, if you trace back to like 2019, it's really interesting. I think the documentations have been wiped off the internet or something now, but there's some really interesting documentation around the Economic Relief Fund, which was then, I think, like 6 months before the pandemic. It was actually renamed through, I don't know what, it was the Senate or something over in the US compared to our British Parliament. It was changed to the COVID Relief Fund, and there was a principle in there in this documentation about the utilization of digital dollars, or the digital trialing system to create this. What we had in the UK was like the furlough. I don't know what they called it, like the bail plans that they had out in the US, to try and see if they could mint the money and utilize it in that way as a trial period, and also gain that trend mechanism of who would actually depend on these handouts, if you for a better word, furlough, as I said, here in the UK, and build that methodology for when basic universal income comes over these coming years. So looping that back to this point of the timing, where we talk about UK Finance saying that we would publish the results in this upcoming summer, it just rings the bells further in my head of the timing of all these kind of announcements, these projects coming into fruition, the pilots finishing, and then turning into a news. I can just envision in 2025 the switch on of everything. And that's not just made up numbers or dates. The people who have been viewing this channel for a long time, or need reminders, or are new to this channel at least, go and check out the RTGS video I did that is literally saying 2025 is the year. November 2025 to be specific. And if you think about a market cycle, you could initiate that the market could potentially start a bull cycle towards the end of this year, and it may last just up to around a year, taking you to the November. Like in previous many cycles before, you start seeing the diminishment of the markets in a slow fashion. Sometimes it looks harsh at the beginning, but it's harsher when you look at it on a 3, 6, 12-month scale. So I've got this feeling that we'll have like this year of crazy uprise, and then eventually November 2025 will come around, and we will have the switch on of the new RTGS system. We will have CBDC programmable money in play, along with basic universal income announcements, 4-day weeks. God, I can think of 15-minute Cs maybe a few years away. Who knows? But they're all the concepts, they're all the initiatives of the UN Agenda 30 program. So that's why I'm saying, like, planning ahead, thinking ahead, researching as much as possible. Even if you don't believe it, just understand that these things are coming whether we like it or not. Okay, I'm not making these up. They are real things. You can find them out for yourself, and you will see them for yourself as and when your governments decide to release them, when they think that you as people are ready to be facilitated in this manner. So when we look at the projects like Quant here, and pulling around the aspect of, you know, digital bonds, or in the aspiration in general of depositories, tokenization, you know, digital assets, all these kind of things, and the utilization of that through banks. I've always said this: there will come a time where the banks will have caught up. They're working on it in the background. They will start facilitating crypto. They will allow you to hold crypto in your bank accounts. Why do you think that they've been trying to ban and block it for so long? It's not because they see it as a threat. I mean, it has been. They now see it as an opportunity. So they're turning it all off, making it difficult, so that then eventually they can catch up. And then eventually, I'm assuming, and I believe strongly, in the next 12 months, you will start seeing announcements from all these big names here, like Barclays, HSBC, MasterCard. They'll start announcing to you as customers that, hey guys, we can now allow crypto and you can hold it here, and we can offer some staking APY rewards, like instead of your savings, blah, blah, blah. So all that money that we thought we were taking out of the bank to try and save ourselves will now get dragged back into the centralized systems, because there's no way in my mind, unless there's a miraculous change of events, with the exception of Bitcoin potentially, I still think it will get dragged in at some point, because we see it in ETF format. In my mind, ETF is centralized, so how can Bitcoin be decentralized other than the technology? The actual usage of it sounds quite centralized to me, but please do argue that point in the comments. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that. But my point being is that these banks will more than likely centralize a lot of these crypto assets, and you'll probably see a reduction in that total number of crypto assets that are available in the world right now to maybe 50% wiped out in the next few years, and maybe up to 70-80% over the next 5 to 10 years, purely because they just won't be regulated, they won't be used, their ideas, they get bought out. You'll see merging of companies, like kind of like what we've seen with Singularity Net and a couple of the other ones. You're going to see more and more of that. And that's just, imagine the World Wide Web bubble. I wasn't really, I don't know how old I was when that all actually originated, but I remember internet vaguely coming in, and then, Microsoft going from like Windows 3.0, wherever it was, on folders, to Windows 95, which was a revolution at the time, all these things. And in the whole world, companies were like all over the place, like hundreds of thousands of companies, and all of a sudden merging and buyouts, like we're seeing with the retail space of the last 10 or so years, 15 years. And then all of a sudden there's a monopolization. You've got like AliExpress, you've got Alibaba, you've got Amazon, of course, you've got eBay still, and the retailers are slowly diminishing, but still surviving in some instances because they were bought out or merged, etc., etc. So consolidation is very natural in the world, especially in business and industry, and it's no different, I believe, in the crypto sphere. I think the ideologies are quite similar between a lot of the crypto assets. You think how many there are, and people are always like, oh, follow this project, check this project out, and I'm like, this sounds exactly the same as this one. Why would I can't have the time to add all these assets, for sure. And the ultimate thing is, a lot of these newer companies do advance on ones that we've been holding for 5-10 years, and you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, this one's now rising because the one I've been following for like 5-10 years, promised all this stuff, isn't delivering, or it's being upscaled or outdone by a newer project. And that's just how the industry world works, right? It's the same with smartphones, products in general, services in general. So it's really interesting to see from Quant's perspective their involvement over these last few years in these kind of projects initiatives. And it was quite humorous to me to see people laughing Quant off in the kind of like recent events, like Money 20 or whatever money events and crypto events last year, whereby there wasn't much news coming out of Quant. I was like, that doesn't mean Quant's disappearing. It means they're busy, and you don't just send out updates for the sake of it. Do you know what I'm bored of? I'm bored of like white papers with false promises on them, and I'm bored of like quarterly updates which just basically reflect absolute nonsense, most crypto assets, and it's just to fulfill the boots of social media to say you've done a post and communication's gone out, when actually if you look at it, you're like, we're in a bear market, nothing's really happening. Of course there's development, or at least hopefully the successful projects will be the ones that have been developing over the last year or two and then jumping out when the crypto market rises and they take advantage of those coin prices, etc., to reinvest into their companies. But for me, Quant has always been very active. It's just that you may not have seen it publicly. I know a lot of it because of the digital pound events that I go to. I see the Quant team quite regularly there. I've worked on them closely in Paris Blockchain Week earlier this year, and they are phenomenal. There's no doubt about it. They are on another level from a technical perspective, from a knowledge and expertise perspective. And it ticks the box when I see things like their initiations with the likes here of the Regulated Liability Network. As I said, these links are quite easy to follow. Go check them out yourselves. But for me, whether we like it or not, as I said in a previous video for Hedera, central bank digital currency is coming. They're very much on our doorstep. So we need to get really involved with companies and projects that are involved in these areas, whether we like it or not, morally or whatever. Why else am I in this crypto market? I have an absolute passion and fascination for it, of course, 100%. But ultimately, I'd like to make money off it, like anyone did in the World Wide Web bubbles, and still to this day probably do as well. And then you get this opportunity to be involved in something like this, something significant, something unique. And the progression is phenomenal in the financial sector. We've seen the ISO 222 compliance. People just jumped on the bandwagon. I think I spoke about this like a few years ago. In fact, it's all backtracks to like the 90s and the early noughties. It's not a new concept. It's just recently been signed off over the last couple of years to initiate the digitalization of currency, the standardization of messaging services in the financial industry, and to be able to facilitate things like CBDCs and digital assets. And that's why now banks have been sending out to their business customers, first and foremost, about ISO 222 compliance. What does that mean in terms of growth, economy, holding your assets, etc., etc. So there's still a long way to go, and this policy debate point is absolutely in fruition still, that there's still not full, complete 100% answers. There's still a lot of logistical elements from a cross-border perspective to iron out, as well as internally. Systems will need to be fully upgraded everywhere. And again, back to my point, that's why banks have, or part of the reason why banks have been rejecting things, because they need to catch up. They need to update their systems to then make it ready. And as I said, they will turn it on. There's no doubt in my mind they will turn it on, and they will allow you to facilitate crypto within your own existing current bank accounts. Mark my words. And I've seen it and heard it in a multitude of behind closed doors events that I go to on a regular basis. So I'm not always just trying to do videos. I'm actually also working in the background and going to things that I'm fortunate to be able to go to. Some things can't always be brought to attention immediately, but I will always talk about them as and when the opportunity arises or the opportunity allows me to. And this is a really interesting movement for sure. But back to the point, it's exciting in the sense that as an investor, we look at these technological advancements and the fact that Quant are heavily related themselves to these areas of interest. It excites me. And that leads us nicely to the point of the Quant price in the chart, which has been indeed fluctuating over the last couple of weeks. But I just drew this chart back out a bit from a historical perspective. Only this data goes back, I think, to around middle or beginning of 2021. We don't need to talk about that too much as per se, but we will talk about the fact that the previous all-time high was at $429. That's phenomenal, and we're currently floating at 70. If I draw back in here, you'll notice, and this is from the previous video that I did in February, I haven't moved these around, you will notice that I tracked this, one of the lower points here on the quant chart, and one of the most recent points that we had up at these higher spectrums of quant when we were looking at it back then. And you'll see I drew in some circles. These were DCA opportunities for me. These are buy orders that I put in my account, and these certainly came into fruition, and I absolutely loved it when we hit back down to this area. So remember, I say predominantly it's not financial advice, but I don't always go for the exact level of the fib level. I go slightly higher. So I had mine at 67. That came in a couple of days ago or a few days ago, and it actually came back in again yesterday, although my buy order had already gone in and I hadn't had another one set. It was a bit of disappointing, but I'm glad to be taking quant at these current prices, $70. My instant reaction to seeing this was that we could potentially break that support barrier and drop back down towards these $50, maybe even $40 marks again. I think that's quite far-fetched at this moment in time. It's definitely not impossible. But if we look at the performance indicators on the right-hand side, I think there's plenty of opportunity to come down a bit lower as well. And if we're going to do that, we then start looking at some of the more micro level spectrums. So for instance, 59 is an area of interest, 55, 51, and I think that's just under 50. So you could play some games around those areas. For me personally, I'm going to be DCAing at this 70 mark every time it kind of like bounces around that area. For the sake of it, and if I look at previous data, particularly this area, an old fib retracement line that I put in many moons ago, I did draw this in as an area of interest, and people were like, no, it's not coming back to there, we've gone flying now. And I was like, no, trust me, because there's a lack of data and support areas here. And lo and behold, in the last few weeks, we've been playing with that exact area, and look at that, it dipped pretty much identically where I thought it might do. So I'm now interested at this lower region, which is around 58. So that's not too far off where it is now, but it's still a $10 difference, guys. So that's my next big buy orders. I'm going to, as I said, accumulate where possible here, but I'm going to have a bit of a chunky order back down here just in case it hits. And all that could take, guys, is some negative impact, negative news in the crypto market, and it could slide very quickly, as we've seen many times, not just in this asset class, but in others as well. And from a DCA perspective, just to clarify that point, if you look at the 14 and 28 day RSIs in the bottom left here, they're bang on 38, both of them. So there's a big squeeze going on right now. And it's in that very low spectrum. So the DCA is definitely ticking the box in my mind, but also the opportunity that we're still in a negative market that we could potentially retrace down to those lower regions, lower than we are currently. And hopefully, if our narratives go in our favor of what we were saying towards the end of this year and into 2025, if we can balance at this area and we're not starting back at these lower traditional areas of 35-40, but instead starting at 60-70, the power ratio and all the other variables in the world that are occurring, news-wise, narrative-wise, etc., could insinuate that we could smash way beyond that $400 odd. And when we talk about enterprise utility, if you think about Ethereum, how high that is, and people developing on Ethereum or buying Ethereum, etc., not necessarily a whole ETH or an Ether, but segments of Ether, is no different to Quant. And I think that's why we could see those higher levels for sure. And in fact, in the previous charts that we've drawn up on Quant, you can see some of the really critical areas of interest. Certainly for me, I would be definitely taking advantage of some of the double efforts from these sort of $70 marks that I've been purchasing. Even when I was buying Quant, can you believe it? I was buying Quant at $154. Absolutely ridiculous, but in the long run, it could work somewhat in my favor. But for me, I'm looking at some really interesting levels well over that $500 mark. Could it get to the 1,000 mark in the next bull run? It's technically possible, but I think logically, definitely maybe around that kind of $800 mark could be an area of interest. Who knows? But it's one of those risk management perspective is like, it's never definite, but we can calculate obviously from this $70 mark. I do anticipate it to be at least towards that 200 minimum. So we can at least try and make some beneficial takings of profits in those areas at least. We'll have to see. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you been accumulating quant like I have in these regions? Long-term holder, short-term holder? Are you trying to recoup money that you may have lost in those higher regions? Love to know each and every one of yours opinions. But for me, quant is an absolute powerhouse. It can have quiet moments in the news, but trust me, in the background, it's an absolute giant making waves. Thanks for watching this video, guys. We'll see you in the next quant video. Take care. Bye-bye.